Hello, everyone. We are on chapter 19 in Farmer Boy, page 203, Keeping House. Uncle Andrew lived 10 miles away. For a week, Father and Mother were getting ready to go, and all the time they were thinking of things that must be done while they were away. Even when Mother was climbing into the buggy, she was talking. Be sure to gather the eggs every night, she said, and I depend on you, Eliza Jane, to take care of the churning. Don't salt the butter too much. Pack it in the small tubs and be sure you cover it. Remember not to pick the beans and the peas I'm saving for seed. Now you all be good while we're gone. She was tucking her hoops down between the seat and the dashboard. Father spread the lap robe. And mind, Elijah Jane, be careful of fires. Don't you leave the house while there's a fire in the cook stove. And don't get to scuffling with lighted candles, whatever you do. And Father tightened the reins and the horses started. Don't eat all the sugar, Mother called back. The buggy turned into the road. The horses began to trot rapidly, taking Father and Mother away. In a little while, the sound of the buggy wheels ceased. Father and Mother were gone. Nobody said anything. Even Eliza Jane looked a little scared. The house and the barns and the fields seemed very big and empty now. For a whole week, Father and Mother would be 10 miles away. Suddenly, Almanzo threw his hat into the air and yelled. Alice hugged herself and cried, What'll we do first? They could do anything they liked. There was nobody to stop them. We'll do the dishes, then make the bed, Eliza Jane said, all bossy. Let's make ice cream, Royal shouted. Eliza Jane loved ice cream. She hesitated and said, Well. Elmanzo ran after Royal to the ice house. They dug a block of ice out of the sawdust and put it in a grain sack. They laid the sack on the back porch and pounded it with hammers till the ice was crushed. Alice came out to watch them while she whipped egg whites on a platter. She beat them with a fork till they were too stiff to slip when she tilted the platter. Eliza Jane measured milk and cream and dipped the sugar up from the barrel in the pantry. It was not common maple sugar, but white sugar bought at the store. Mother used it only when company came. Eliza Jane dipped 6 cupfuls, and then she smoothed the sugar that was left, and you would hardly have missed any. She made a big milk pail full of yellow custard. They set the pail in the tub and they packed the snowy crushed ice around it with salt, and they covered it all with a blanket. Every few minutes they took off the blanket and uncovered the pail and stirred the freezing ice cream. When it was frozen, Alice brought saucers and spoons, and Alonzo brought out cake and the butcher knife. He put enormous let me move this. I don't know if it's showing on the screen or not. He cut enormous pieces of cake while Eliza Jane heaped at the saucers. They could eat all the ice cream and cake they wanted to. No one would stop them. At noon, they had eaten the whole cake and almost all the ice cream. Eliza Jane said it was time to get dinner, but the others didn't want any dinner. Almanzo said, All I want is watermelon. Alice jumped up. Goody, let's go get one. Alice, Eliza Jane cried, you come right back here and do the breakfast dishes. I will, said Alice. Alice called out when I come back. Alice and Almanzo went into the hot melon field where the melons lay round above their wilting flat leaves. Almanzo snapped his fingers against the green rinds and he listened. When a melon sounded ripe, it was ripe, and when it sounded green, it was green. But when Almanzo said a melon sounded ripe, Alice thought it sounded green. There wasn't really any way to know, though Almanzo was sure he knew more about melons than any girl. So in the end, they picked 6 of the biggest melons and they lugged them one by one to the ice house and put them on the damp, cold sawdust. Then Alice went into the house to do the dishes. Almanzo said he wasn't going to do anything. Maybe he'd go swimming. But as soon as Alice was out of sight, he skipped through the barns and stole into the pasture where the colts were. The pasture was big and the sun was very hot. The air shimmered and waved with the heat, and little insects made shrill sounds. Bess and Betsy were lying down in the shade of the tree, and their little colts stood near them, wagging their small bushy tails and straddling a little on their long, gangly legs. The yearlings and the 2-year-olds and the 3-year-olds were grazing. All of them lifted their heads and stared at Almanzo. He went slowly toward them, holding out his hand. There wasn't anything in his hand, but they didn't know that. He didn't mean to do anything. He only wanted to get near enough to pet them. Starlight and the other little colt ran wobbling to their mothers. And Bess and Beauty lifted up their heads and looked, then laid them down again. The big colts all pricked up their ears. One big colt stepped towards Almanzo, and then another. The 6 big colts were all coming. Almanzo wished he had brought carrots for them. They were so beautiful and free and big, tossing their manes and showing the whites of their eyes. The sunshine glistened on their strong arched necks and on the muscles of their chests. Suddenly one of them said, "Whoosh!" One of them kicked and one of them squealed, and all at once their heads went up and their tails went up and their hooves thundered on the ground. All their brown haunches and high black tails were turned to Almanzo. Like a thundering whirlwind, those 6 colts went around the tree, and Almanzo heard them behind him. He whirled around. He saw their pounding hoofs and big chests coming straight at him. They were running too fast to stop. There wasn't time to get out of the way. Almanzo's eyes shut, and he yelled, "Whoa!" The air and the ground shook. His eyes opened, and he saw brown knees rising up in the air. A round belly and hind legs rushed overhead. Brown sides went by him like thunder. His hat flew off. He felt stunned. One of the 3-year-olds had jumped over him. The colts were thundering down across the pasture, and Almanzo saw Royal coming. "Leave those colts be," Royal shouted. He came up and said that for a cent he'd give Almanzo a licking he'd remember. "You know better than to fool with the colts," Royal said. He took Almanzo by the ear. Almanzo trotted, but his ear was pulled all the way to the barns. He said he hadn't done anything. Royal wouldn't listen. "Let me catch you in that pasture again, and I'll whale the hide off of you," Royal said. "I'll tell father, too." Almanzo went away, rubbing his ear. He went down to Trout River and swam in the swimming hole till he felt better. But he thought it wasn't fair that he was the youngest in the family. The afternoon the melons were cold, and Almanzo carried them to the grass under the balsam tree in the yard. Royal stuck the butcher knife into the dewy green rinds, and every melon was so ripe that the rinds cracked open. Almanzo and Alice and Eliza Jane and Royal bit deep into the juicy cold sides, and they ate till they could eat no more. Almanzo pinched the sleek black seeds, popping them at Eliza Jane until she made him quit. Then he slowly ate the last slice of melon, and he said, "I'm going to fetch Lucy to eat up the rinds." "You will do no such thing," said Eliza Jane. "The idea, a dirty old pig in the front yard." "She is not either a dirty old pig," said Almanzo. "Lucy's a little young clean pig, and pigs are the cleanest animals there are. You just ought to see the way Lucy keeps her bed clean and turns it and airs it up and makes it every day. Horses won't do that, nor cows, nor sheep, nor anything. Pigs, I guess I know that. I guess I know as much about pigs as you do," Eliza Jane said. "Then don't call Lucy dirty. She's just as clean as you be." "Well, Mother told you to obey me," Eliza Jane said, "and I'm not going to waste melon rinds on any pig. I'm going to make watermelon rind preserves." "I guess they're as much my rinds as they are yours," Almanzo began, but Royal got up and said, "Come along, Manzo, it's chore time." Almanzo said no more, but when the chores were done, he let Lucy out of her pen. The little pig was as white as a lamb, and she liked Almanzo. Her little curled tail quicked whenever she saw him. She followed him into the house, grunting happily, and she squealed at him at the door till Eliza Jane said she couldn't hear herself think. After supper, Almanzo took a plate of scraps and fed them to Lucy. He sat on the back step and scratched her prickly back. Pigs enjoy that. In the kitchen, Eliza Jane and Royal were arguing about candy. Royal wanted some, but Eliza Jane said that candy pulls were only for winter evenings. Royal said he didn't see why candy wouldn't be just as good in the summer. Almanzo thought so too, and he went in and sided with Royal. Alice said she knew how to make candy. Eliza Jane wouldn't do it, but Alice mixed sugar and molasses and water and boiled them, and then she poured the candy on buttered platters and set it on the porch to cool. They rolled up their sleeves and buttered their hands, ready to pull it, and Eliza Jane buttered her hands too. All the time Lucy was squealing for Almanzo. He went out to see if the candy was cool enough, and he thought his little pig should have some. The candy was cool. No one was watching, so he took a big wad of the soft brown candy and dropped it over the edge of the porch into Lucy's wide-open mouth. Then they all pulled candy. They pulled it into long strands and doubled the strands and pulled again. Every time they doubled it, they took a bite. It was very sticky. It stuck to their teeth and their fingers and their faces, and somehow got in their hair and stuck there. It should have become hard and brittle, but it didn't. They pulled and they pulled, and still it was soft and sticky. Long past bedtime, they get up and went to bed. The next morning, when Almanzo started to do chores, Lucy was standing in the yard. Her tail hung limp and her head hung down. She did not squeal when she saw him. She shook her head sadly and wrinkled her nose. Where her white teeth should have been, there was a smooth brown streak. Lucy's teeth were stuck together with candy. She could not eat. She could not drink. She could not even squeal. She could not grunt. But when she saw Almanzo coming, she ran. Almanzo yelled for Royal. They chased Lucy all around the house, under the snowball bushes and the lilacs. They chased her all over the garden. Lucy whirled and dodged and ducked and ran like anything. All the time she didn't make a sound. She couldn't. Her mouth was full of candy. She ran between Royal's legs and upset him. Almanzo almost grabbed her and went sprawling on his nose. She tore through the peas and squashed the ripe tomatoes and uprooted the green, round cabbages. Eliza Jane kept telling Royal and Almanzo to catch her, and Alice ran after her. At last they cornered her. She dashed around Alice's skirts. Almanzo fell on her and grabbed. She kicked and tore a long hole down the front of his blouse. Almanzo held her down, and Alice kept her kicking hind legs. Royal pried her mouth open and scraped out the candy. Then how Lucy squealed. She squealed all the squeals that had been in her all night, and all the squeals she couldn't squeal while they were chasing her. And she ran screaming to her pen. Almanzo James Wilder, just look at yourself, Eliza James scolded. He couldn't, and he didn't want to. Even Alice was horrified because he had wasted candy on a pig, and his blouse was ruined. It could be patched, but the patch would show. I don't care, Almanzo said. He was glad it was a whole week before Mother would know. That day they made ice cream again, and they ate the last cake. Alice said she knew how to make a pound cake. She said she'd make one, and then she was going to go sit in the parlor. Almanzo thought it wouldn't be any fun, but Eliza Jane said, You'll do no such thing, Alice. You know very well the parlor is just for company. It was not Eliza Jane's parlor, and Mother hadn't said she couldn't sit in it, Almanzo thought. Almanzo thought that Alice could sit in the parlor if she wanted to. That afternoon he came into the kitchen to see if the pound cake was done. It smelled. Alice was taking it out of the oven. It smelled so good that he broke a little piece off the corner. Then Alice cut a slice to hide the broken place, and then they ate 2 more slices with the last of the ice cream. I can make more ice cream, Alice said. Eliza Jane was upstairs, and Almanzo said, Let's go into the parlor. They tiptoed in without making a sound. The light was dim because the blinds were drawn, but the parlor was beautiful. The wallpaper was white and gold, and the carpet was of Mother's best weaving, almost too fine to step on. The center table was marble-topped, and it held the tall parlor lamp, all white and gold china and pink-painted roses. Beside it lay the photograph album with colors of red velvet and mother of pearl. All around the wall stood solemn horsehair chairs, and George Washington's picture looked sternly from its frame between the windows. Alice hitched up her hoops behind and sat on the sofa. The slippery haircloth slid her right off onto the floor. She didn't dare laugh out loud for fear Eliza Jane would hear. Then Almanzo slid off a chair. When company came and they had to sit in the parlor, they kept themselves on the slippery chairs by pushing their toes against the floor. But now they could let go and slide. They slid off the sofa and the chairs till Alice was giggling so hard they didn't dare slide any more. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and end it here because there's several pages left and I won't be able to finish them in the 15 minutes that this video allows. So we are finishing on page 218 and we will come back to page 218 to finish up chapter 19. So this is chapter 19.